President Trump is furious and pressuring Prime Minister Netanyahu, questioning if he wants to resign. Israel's attack on Lebanon yesterday led to the Strait of Hormuz closing again. Today we'll examine this issue. President Trump also shared a Just the News article on Truth Social titled "Netanyahu's Shaky Re-Election Chances. Trump Holds the Cards." This article includes President Trump's remarks from an interview with an Israeli media outlet where he said, "We have to see who is running. I maintain a good relationship with Netanyahu, but he needs to be more rational." In addition, the article mentions that President Trump is most likely to support Prime Minister Netanyahu, but it also includes references to Netanyahu's rivals, former Prime Minister Naftali Bennett and lawmaker Gadi Eisenkot. So President Trump backs Prime Minister Netanyahu, but subtly hinted he might support someone else if Netanyahu disrupts the ceasefire. The reason President Trump reacted this way is because of Israel's airstrikes on Lebanon. On June 21, Israel carried out airstrikes on Lebanon using fighter jets and drones to strike more than 10 locations, resulting in at least 5 deaths. This happened just a few hours after a ceasefire was established between Israel and Hezbollah. The atmosphere had been quite positive, with Iran and the United States announcing that they would sign a ceasefire MOU, leading many to hope that the war might finally end. However, when Israel launched these airstrikes, Iran responded by once again blocking the Hormuz Strait, escalating the situation. The first article of the MOU, which was about to be signed, included a promise to immediately and permanently halt military operations on all fronts, including Lebanon, and to guarantee Lebanon's territorial integrity and sovereignty. But when Israel attacked Lebanon, Iran responded by blocking the Hormuz Strait. Because of this, President Trump must be feeling frustrated. Whenever he tries to talk with Iran and make gestures of reconciliation, Israel keeps interfering. In fact, Prime Minister Netanyahu is currently in a very complicated political situation. Israel is facing a general election in October, and Prime Minister Netanyahu is already facing several criminal trials on corruption charges. As long as the war continues, political accountability and judicial issues can be overshadowed by national security concerns. But as soon as the front stabilizes and things return to peacetime, the situation could change completely. In fact, there is constant talk within Israel about the political fallout that will follow the war. In particular, the surprise attack by Hamas in October 2023 still remains a deep wound in Israeli society. At that time, Hamas crossed the border and attacked Israeli territory, resulting in more than 1,200 deaths. Since the incident, there has been ongoing debate and calls for accountability over the intelligence failure. There are still lingering questions about why Mossad, which is considered one of the world's top government intelligence agencies, and the military intelligence agencies failed to detect any signs in advance. Some criticize possible serious issues in intelligence gathering, while opposition parties question the government's security response at the time. In addition, the structure of the coalition government led by Prime Minister Netanyahu is also an important factor. The current coalition government includes a large number of hardline parties. They remain strongly opposed to talks with Hezbollah and withdrawing from Lebanon's occupied areas. If Prime Minister Netanyahu accepts U.S. demands to reduce military action or pursue a ceasefire, there may be strong backlash from the coalition. In the worst case, there is even talk that the coalition government could collapse and lead to an early general election. Therefore, experts observing Israeli politics believe that Prime Minister Netanyahu is considering not only military decisions, but also his own political survival. They say that the political risks of stopping the war are too great, which is why he cannot easily change direction. President Trump aims to ease tensions on the Lebanese front to enable US-Iran negotiations. This has led to an unusual Middle East situation where America's strategic goals conflict with Israel's domestic politics. Of course, even in the current situation, there are some aspects that can be seen positively. The point is that neither the US nor Iran has given up on negotiations themselves. Iran has declared the blockade of the Strait of Hormuz and expressed a hardline stance, but at the same time, it has not completely walked away from the negotiations. The Iranian delegation has already arrived in Zurich, Switzerland for the negotiations. This delegation includes many people, such as Speaker of the Parliament Ghalibaf, Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi, and central bank officials. High-ranking security officials and key figures from the oil sector are also included. This is being interpreted as a sign that the negotiations will comprehensively address not only military issues, but also economic and energy matters. The United States is emphasizing this, especially with Vice President J.D. Vance attending the negotiations, which increases the meeting's significance. The United States sending an official at the vice presidential level shows they consider these negotiations strategically important. In addition, it has been reported that Stephen Witkoff, along with the U.S. negotiation team including the Middle East envoy, has already arrived and is making practical preparations. This negotiation will proceed based on the 14 items included in the previous Memorandum of Understanding for the end of the war. The two sides have agreed to maintain a ceasefire for the next 60 days while discussing key issues. The most important agenda item is Iran's nuclear program. The United States is demanding measures to limit Iran's nuclear development capabilities and to strengthen the international community's verification system, while Iran is asking for the easing of economic sanctions and normalization of financial transactions in return. In addition, the issue of restructuring the security order in the Middle East region will also be discussed. There is a possibility that discussions will take place on a wide range of issues, from the problem of armed groups in the region, including Lebanon, Syria, and Iraq, to the extent of U.S. military intervention. The energy issue is also considered a very important agenda item. In particular, the stability of the Strait of Hormuz is directly linked to the global economy, so it is an area where neither side can easily back down. Currently, the negotiation deadline is set at 60 days, but if discussions make progress, there is also the possibility of extending the period further. Therefore, this Swiss meeting is expected to be a test to see whether the United States and Iran can build a new relationship, going beyond just maintaining the ceasefire. Of course, the United States will also have to manage the Israel factor going forward. Looking at the current situation in the Middle East, persuading Prime Minister Netanyahu alone will not solve all the problems. On the contrary, if you look at Israel's internal political landscape, there are even assessments that Prime Minister Netanyahu is relatively moderate within the coalition government. This means that some of the parties forming the coalition government are extremely hardline. A representative figure is the Minister of National Security, Itamar Ben-Gvir. Ben-Gvir has repeatedly taken a hardline stance on issues related to the Gaza Strip and Lebanon. In the past, he has also insisted on expanding military operations and has openly expressed negative views on ceasefires or compromises. Because of this, there is analysis in the international community that hardline ministers, including Ben-Gvir, are having a significant influence on the Israeli government's policy direction. The problem is that these hardline forces can act independently of Netanyahu's personal political fate. Even if Netanyahu yields to US pressure and appears conciliatory, he may face immediate backlash from his coalition. If troops are withdrawn from southern Lebanon or clashes with Hezbollah are reduced, some hardline parties may consider leaving the coalition. If that happens, Israeli politics will enter yet another phase of turmoil. Because of this, the challenges currently facing the United States are more complicated than expected. That's because simply consulting with Prime Minister Netanyahu may not be enough. Within the Israeli government, there are still powerful factions that support continuing the war, and they tend to distrust the negotiation process between the United States and Iran itself. Therefore, even if a ceasefire is maintained in the future, it is difficult to say for certain that local clashes or additional military operations will completely disappear. This is a major uncertainty in the Middle East. Even with progress in US-Iran negotiations, new tensions could emerge if Israeli hardliners reject it. Therefore, the future situation in the Middle East could change significantly, not only depending on the outcome of negotiations between the United States and Iran, but also on which direction Israel's domestic politics moves. The next 60 days will be crucial in shaping the direction of the Middle East crisis. Currently, the United States and Iran have managed to sit at the negotiating table after difficult talks, but there are still a mountain of issues left to resolve. Topics like the nuclear program, the easing of economic sanctions, regional armed groups, and energy transport safety are not easy to reach agreement on. The fact that both sides are continuing their dialogue is positive, but in the process of reaching an actual agreement, unexpected conflicts can arise at any time. In particular, the most important variable in this negotiation is likely to be outside the negotiation room. Even while ceasefire negotiations are underway, tensions have not been completely resolved in the border areas with Lebanon, and there are still voices within Israel demanding a hardline response. If additional airstrikes or localized clashes occur, the atmosphere of the negotiations could deteriorate rapidly. In fact, even this time, a single airstrike on Lebanon provoked a strong backlash from Iran, which led to the declaration of the closure of the Strait of Hormuz. The market is also watching this negotiation process very closely. Not only the international oil and energy markets, but also the global financial markets could be greatly affected by the situation in the Middle East. In particular, if tensions around the Strait of Hormuz rise again, concerns about instability in oil supply and demand could grow. That's why the United States also feels the need to ensure the success of this negotiation. Therefore, the international community currently sees this ceasefire not as the end of the war, but as the beginning of a new phase. Depending on the outcome of the negotiations over the next 60 days, the Middle East could enter a phase of stability, or on the contrary, the risk of greater conflict could rise again. Right now, it's closer to a temporary pause in gunfire. This is exactly why many experts believe that the real test is just beginning.